Well, hello everyone. I'm Sue Brayne and welcome to the astrology interview. And today I have with me John Hopkins, who is the founder of Dying to Live with Purpose. Now, as all of you probably already know, my passion in life, which John shares with me, is how can we have a much better relationship with what mortality means to us. And John's just written this fantastic guide. It's called The Guide to Unlocking Potential from Fear to Freedom: How to Unlock Courage, Clarity, and Purpose Through the Wisdom of Mortality. So let's get stuck in. And I'm going to bring a bit of astrology in as well, because I'm really interested in what's happening and how the planets may be affecting this sort of growth of interest in our understanding of what mortality is. So, first question, John, how do you look at the word mortality? What does it mean to you?
Good question. I think what mortality means to me right now is a softer, safer replacement to the word death that seems to trigger everybody. So I've been using mortality more than death just because I find it an easier way to connect with more people.
It's funny, isn't it? Everybody, we all shy away from the word death. It's like, oh, I better not mention that. So I don't know, I'll couch it up in passing, or somebody's just passed over, or, we do kind of, or fallen off, I don't know, fallen off his perch, or, we can make a sort of fun of it. But yeah, it's a big thing, death, and we're not good at it, are we?
No, I mean, I don't want to generalize here, but my feelings are that certainly in the West, we've done everything we can to avoid the conversation around death or mortality. And as a result of this avoidance of this subject, we have found ourselves in a position where we're taking life for granted. We
Yeah,
all pretend like we're going to live forever. We're
yeah.
watching all the Hollywood movies of this sort of a life, a perfect life that is mapped out for us, and we all expect that. And the consequences of this mindset, which, by the way, is a mindset that most people are not aware of. They're not aware of the avoidance of this death creating such seismic problems, not just for us as individuals, but for our entire species.
And I'm curious, how do you term spirituality? What does that mean to you?
Wow, that's a good question. What does spirituality mean to me?
Mm,
It's the connection to the the knowing of something bigger than ourselves, something greater, the oneness, the force from a Star Wars point of view that connects all things. Some people call it God. There are many words
mm.
for God, but from a universal point of view that's non-religious, I like to think of spirituality as the energy that connects all things in the universe. And some people call it the universe itself.
Yeah, they do, don't they? I mean, I think it's really interesting that quantum physics has now looking at the concept of quarks, and if quarks are carrying the essence of life, which apparently they are, and they are the fundamental building blocks of everything in the universe, then everything is alive. It can't die. And I don't know where you are with that or how that feeds into the work that you're doing.
Yes, I mean, I love all that. I love the fact that it feels like we're reaching a point now where science and spirituality are coming together. And I think that is really exciting. And on a side note, I actually think technology is playing a part in all of this as well. As much as there's part of us that's very scared of technology, I do think it's all connected and it's sort of coming together and into what I think is a very exciting sort of singularity moment. Yeah, I was writing something yesterday about the infinite repeating patterns in nature that are often mathematical. So if you look at a shell of a snail or of a seashell, and you can look in it, and everything is in this sort of Fibonacci
Yeah.
spiral, which kind of is an infinite loop.
Yes.
And there's so much wisdom and comfort that I take from looking at these sort of shapes and patterns that are all around us, winking
Yes.
at us, going, it's okay. Everything is just repeating. There is
Yeah.
no end, there is no beginning. There's just this constant flow and cycle. And yeah,
Yeah.
I over time I've taken a lot of comfort for myself in that, and that's helped ease a lot of my own personal fears just from looking around me in nature.
Yes, and also I think it's looking up at night, isn't it, to the sky, the stars, and realizing it, waking up to this infinite what? And I find that incredibly inspiring. I think, who is it that talks about so much about awe? Andrew Harvey. He's a wonderful modern mystic, and he talks about the we've lost awe. We've lost this sense of wonder. We've lost this sense of
Mm,
awe. And I think for me, when I really think about my death, because I practice the Buddhist traditions, which is every day I think about my death. And I really enjoy thinking about it. I was thinking about actually going to the car, just thinking, do you know what? One day I'm not going to be able to go to the car. I won't be here. And it's not frightening. It's just curious. I'm curious of what it will feel like not to be here because I can't imagine it.
yeah. Yeah, there's a beautiful quote that's just popped into my head listening to you talk right now, which is life is the art of learning how to die as consciously as possible. And I
Yeah.
was writing something about Carl Jung this morning, and his life's work led to this similar kind of conclusion, which is the whole of your life is aimed towards this moment of death and trying to feel as complete as possible in this lifetime.
Yes. And he actually said it starts after the midlife crisis,
Yes, that's right.
astrologically.
Yes,
Um, and so the first half of life, and Richard Raw talks about this, Father Richard Raw, he talks about this too. The first half of life, you're kind of at kindergarten school, really. And then you meet the head of the midlife crisis, and it's like, well, Carl Jung says, from that moment on, really the task is to get ready for death.
yes. So interesting that, when you really unpack that, what that means, because I think for so many people, that's the opposite. Is a lot of people get to midlife and then they're feeling like, oh wow, I now can see the endings coming, and I don't want anything to do with that at all because it's getting closer. Whereas actually, if the moment you sort of flip that perspective around, all sorts of wonderful, magical things can start to happen to you with that sort of insight that death can be something special rather than something to be totally feared.
Yeah, I mean, you're in your mid 40s, aren't you?
That's right. Yeah.
So you're going through your midlife crisis right now,
I
and
like to
this
say
is
it's a midlife breakthrough.
a mid. There's a better one, isn't it? Rather than a midlife breakthrough. And it's really interesting that right now that this is what you're doing, that you're really engaging with this whole concept of what mortality is and how we can relate to it better. I mean, that's what your life's work is now, isn't it?
It is totally, yeah, committing full-heartedly into this, and that's what my newsletter Dying to Live with Purpose is all about, is trying to help people to firstly see that death can be a teacher and not something to be feared, and then secondly to provide tools and guidance to actually help you with the next steps
Yeah.
forward into these new insights.
I mean, completely up with you because that's exactly where I feel my journey is going. But I'm much older than you, but it's the same, isn't it? It doesn't really matter how old you are. If you're
Right.
drawn to this, that's it. But the big thing is, isn't it, when you're it's how to work with this when people experiencing or have experienced very traumatic death, or somebody's died in the family very suddenly, or they've ended their life. And whatever we say is, about working with death, how do we work with that better?
Hmm. That's a good question. How do we work with death better? I think the first step really is just through the simple act of acknowledging mortality. we can't expect too much from people too soon.
Yeah.
But, like your practice that you do every morning, where you spend a short time meditating on your own death, if everyone spent 5 minutes every day just contemplating their end, that is the first baby step towards all sorts of amazing things starting to happen.
Mm,
Because the more you contemplate on your own death, the the quicker your fears that hold you back in life start to dissolve. And then
yes.
as soon as those fears start to dissolve, they're never going to go completely, but as they start to fade,
Mm,
the limiting beliefs that you've built around yourself your whole life start to fade. And the moment those walls come down, then a little bravery creeps back in, and then you're more willing to try new things. All of those things you've been postponing
yeah.
in your life, you might want to start getting on with. And then the moment you start doing that, you start to discover things you didn't realize you were capable of. And then,
Mm.
wow, I'm stepping into my potential. And then that intuitively leads you towards a deeper sense of purpose in your life.
Mm. And hopefully helping you to understand that, well, this is what has helped me. And I don't know if this is something that you're working with as well. But the more I've engaged with using astrology actually to understand how death plays itself out in the chart, I now kind of look at, and me, I obviously include myself in this too, is everybody is a walking story. Everybody has a story. And at one point, this story will end, and nobody else will ever live that story apart from me. My story, your story, that's yours. And I think it's the only thing in life which is truly ours, our story. And I
Mm,
think I think that's really helped me to be hugely compassionate towards the human condition, because life is not a bed of roses, as I'm sure you'll agree. And when people do experience horrible things that happen, I think for me, it's to see it more as, well, that's their story. That's been their story, has helped
mm.
me. And I just wondered where you were with that.
Yes, I really resonate with those words. I think it takes me towards the bigger conversation about the paradox of suffering and what is suffering. Suffering feels so deeply unfair on so many levels to so many people.
Yeah.
Um, and trying to make sense of suffering and trying to understand how much of one's energy one should commit to certainly other people's suffering. I mean, we all suffer in our own ways,
Mm.
in our own personal lives, but how do we allow more people to understand that suffering is, I think, part of human evolution? It's needed. Without suffering, you can't experience the polar opposite, which is the joy of life. You need the two, the yin and the
Yeah.
yang, together. And I think Eckhart Tolle talks about this beautifully a lot. And he often uses the analogy of a sapling, a young tree growing, that a young tree can't survive and it can't grow into a big, strong oak without a very powerful wind coming along once in a while and battering this sapling around. And this sapling has to suffer and suffer. But because there's been so much resistance, over
Yeah.
time, the sapling grows stronger and resilient and eventually grows up and into a strong tree.
Mm.
And yeah, you think of all the suffering in the world right now. We live in such difficult times. And I find it's very easy to get sucked into a kind of negativity vortex when I'm starting to commit time to imagining the horrors out there in the world. But equally, I think I'm very privileged in the sense that I'm not living in a war zone at the moment or in some famine-stricken country. And so because of I have an awareness that I have this privilege, I think if we can all, if we're not in those kind of situations, if we can all commit ourselves to using all our energy towards the creativity, towards
Yeah.
unlocking more human awareness. I think Ram Dass also talks a lot about suffering being grace, which seems like
Yes.
such a crazy thing to imagine that
Mm.
great that suffering could be grace, but actually, going back to Eckhart Tolle, he argues that suffering is absolutely fundamental to human
Yeah.
evolution.
And I'll share something with you, which it's always stuck with me, and it is about the suffering at the end of life, but also how I believe that love becomes very present. So a while ago, I was interviewing a lot of people for my book, the D Word, talking about dying, and I met a woman who serendipitously, of course, and I was saying about that's what I was doing, and and she said, "Well, I've had the most terrible experience with my father, and I get very angry about people talking about dying well and good deaths because he had a terrible death." And she said, "I still traumatized by having to sit with him every day as he was fighting death." And she said, I try and block that out. And what I try and remember is him before this happened, but he didn't want to die. He really was fighting. And I suddenly looked at her and I said, "Do you know what? However awful that was for you, you gave him such love by sitting with him. It what didn't feel like love, but that's greater love, isn't it? To sit and witness your father who doesn't want to die, and she never left his side."
Mm,
I'll never
beautiful.
forget her saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm really feeling the selflessness of that act.
Yeah,
And as someone who's trained as a soul midwife, which is a type of end of life guide myself, we were taught that even though your act of kindness of sitting with someone might not be reciprocated in that moment, it is energetically felt by the soul of that person. So if you can tap into that, remember that, then it's
yeah,
much easier to sit with somebody who's dying that might not feel like they're grateful for your
yeah,
presence, because of the baggage that's been built up around a soul through
yeah.
their lifetime.
And the thing is that we want to fix it, don't we? We don't want them to suffer, but there's nothing we can do. And that throws us into hopeless, helpless if we can't fix it, if we can't help somebody. And that's where she was coming from. And of course, that is one of the two kind of triggers that creates trauma, that whole concept of traumatic stress. So, I'm very, I'm sure you are really up for this too, is not to romanticize death. It is a huge process that each one of us is going to have to face in whatever way we do, but it's great if we can prepare for it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is the ultimate fear, is it not? It's the one thing that, you'll never overcome your fear of this giant mystery,
No,
so the challenge is, can you at least reduce it somewhat in this lifetime to give you a better chance of dying more peacefully?
just explain some of the techniques that you encourage people to use.
So, firstly, I encourage everybody to do what you do, which is to meditate on their own death. Now, I've got a meditation that I'm going to be releasing quite soon, which is taking that meditation, and it's something I've been doing actually, which is meditating on my own death in order to help me reduce my own fear of death, but also just meditating on how I want to feel when I die with no regrets, which is an additional thing I've added in here. So, what I'm telling people is like, try to imagine the day you die and feeling like you have said everything you needed to say and done everything you needed to do. Imagine the
Mm.
setting around you, the weather, the temperature. Are you inside? Are you outside? Are there people around you? Are you on your own?
Mm.
But the most important thing is that feeling of completeness. And if you are a believer in manifestation and visualization, which many people are, and even if you're not that spiritual, lots of people still believe in setting a 3 or 5 or 10 year goal. Well, I challenge you to go all the way to the end and start to visualize how you want to feel as you
Yeah.
die. Not when you get the big house in 5 years' time, but if you feel amazing as you die, then intuitively everything in your life would have been taken care of. All the things you ever wanted would have happened to get you
Mm.
to the feeling at the end of your life. So this is something that I'm starting to feel into is like a powerful visualization tool for people. And in fact, I just today commissioned a new AI tool called Reverse Story, which hopefully
Okay.
will be ready in about 1 month. And I'm going to make it
Yeah.
available to all my subscribers on Dying to Live a Purpose. But essentially, it's going to be a tool that reverse engineers your life from the moment you die so you can live a life with no regrets.
That's fantastic.
You know, there's this big saying, the more you visualize something, the more likely it's going to manifest into existence. And even if you are thinking about a death in 30 years' time or 20 years' time or whenever it is, the more you build this practice, the more you're preparing for death to arrive at any time anyway, and to die
Yes.
better whenever that moment arrives.
So there's a Native American Indian, I can't remember his name, so forgive me, Native American Indian, who said every day is the perfect day to die. And
Mm.
there that was his culture. I know the Navajos won't talk about the dead. They don't engage with it like that. But certainly for whoever he is, you'll find him in a Google search. But he's very famous for saying that every day is, and obviously, some of them had reached, and I think a lot of the Tibetans do this when they've reached a certain level of consciousness that they know when they're going to die and they prepare for it, or they walk into the woods. It's a bit like a cat.
Yes,
A cat often knows when they're going to die and they just go. They just go
yes,
somewhere, and I'm curious about that.
yes. Yeah, it's, lots of indigenous cultures were so at peace with themselves, so in tune with their spirituality, that they were able to choose the day they died
Yeah.
with total confidence,
Yes.
and they were able to, you know, walk off into the woods and never come back. And everyone else was happy with that as well. I know
Yes.
in Scandinavian cultures, um, that when you reached a certain age and were starting to become physically or mentally infirm and therefore becoming a burden on the community, that it was totally acceptable to just take yourself up to the sacred cliff, say your prayers, and jump off. And you would,
Yeah.
that was the way it happened, and everyone was totally cool with that, right? And the individual was cool with it, the community was cool with it. And yeah, I find that absolutely fascinating. And
Mm.
and I personally would love to, or I am imagining a world in the future where we get back to a state of mind whereby we're so at harmony with ourselves and with nature, and we've reconnected with spirituality again, that we can choose the day you die, and that becomes a massive celebration. And that death is not this thing to
Yeah.
be feared.
Yeah.
It's something you can plan.
Yeah, I'm very interested in what you feel or you think about the concept of reincarnation, because I don't think we can talk about death without bringing that in.
Yes, I mean, I was raised as a Christian, and then I think it was in my early 20s, I finally stopped saying my prayers every night, which I did for many years, just because I felt somehow at some level it was becoming to feel hollow to me. Um, I then went through a section of my life where I wasn't an atheist. I felt like there was something else there that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then ever since my midlife breakthrough, I've definitely sensed that reincarnation is what's happening because, again, going back to the patterns in nature, the repeating patterns that seem to be the building blocks of existence. And if you just take that same logic and put it into life and
Yeah.
death, inevitably all the signs point towards reincarnation. And ever since those ideas started to percolate into my head and become more solid, all sorts of things started to happen where I started to have past life flashbacks. Or I realized that I've been having them my whole life. I just didn't know that that's what they were. I just put them down to my sort of crazy imagination. Um, and so, yes, I personally believe in reincarnation. There seem
Mm,
to be lots of different flavors of that, depending on which books you read and where.
mm,
But I think the fundamental logic of infinite repeating patterns in existence uh, point
mm.
towards reincarnation being a logical truth.
It's such a mind-blowing thing to think about. I mean, just incarnating is mind-blowing enough, coming from
Yeah,
spirit into a planet that's spinning at, I don't know, 60, well, however many, 1,000 miles an hour. And it's the only planet in the solar system that actually had, well, as far as we know, that contain physical life. I mean, that's mind-blowing in itself. And then this
yeah,
whole concept of we're here, the reason for our life is to grow and evolve, and then we die, and then consciousness continues. And do
yeah,
we, as we evolve, do we feed the collective? Is that how we can heal, not heal, but how we can raise consciousness for the collective?
yeah. I absolutely think it is. I think this is all part of this incredible evolution of the universe experiencing itself in all of its dramas and high stakes over time through all of us. And listening to you talk makes me, the word awe keeps popping back into my head because, the probability of this planet existing in the grand scheme of the cosmos and the probability of us as human beings existing on this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan says, is
Yes.
so wild. And yet here we
Yes.
are having this conversation
Yes.
about the very thing, which feels very meta and amazing. And it just fills me with a sense of awe that I'm here at all having this conversation with you. And
Yeah.
I think there's a joy in that is waiting for more and more people to experience because every time we do talk, when I talk about this sort of thing, I get all fizzy inside and I can feel my instinct really, my heart really opening and coming alive. And I get energized and invigorated. And it's almost like an energy of awe flowing through me through the very act of discussing existence. I believe we're all here to slowly raise consciousness through all the joy and all the suffering combined that human beings are able to experience in these lifetimes.